Right.
Thanks.
The light is a little bit dark. Too brighter earlier. Oh, it's good. It's fine. Works. Fine. Do you all read this?
No.
No. Okay, that's fine. Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's good.
That's too bright.
It's too bright.
I'm just kidding. I'm
really fine. All right. So thank you so much, Jonathan, for inviting me to give this workshop here. To be honest, I was really surprised that I was invited to give the keynote speech at Prestige's 38th anniversary. Thank you. I was here for the 30th anniversary, 8 years ago when I first joined Toastmasters. Daiwa was the president at the time. A lot of the older members that I saw inside the PowerPoint were here too at the same time. I remember that time George Yen, I think, was the main speaker. He was the international president of Toastmasters at the time. And he came out of Prestige, actually, George Yen. I was also surprised you invited me because, you know, Lester Lynn would be a better choice because he was a president over here. Or perhaps Joy, who was a charter member of Prestige. So I was very surprised when Jonathan contacted me and to give this small speech about this keynote speech. I've had a long friendship with Prestige, although I haven't come around for the last 3 or 4 years, mostly due to my wife's illness. But I had a long history with Prestige, and my wife too, she had a long history with Prestige as well. Especially when you used to be in Norman, right? You used to be in Norman, in the bookstore, and Booksman's over there. And I remember the one night when I was there, and we always used to go second round in Prestige. We always used to go to the coffee shop at the back. And I remember that night, I think Annie was the president, or she was going to be the next president, and I remember sitting with Annie, and she like needs members, and there were 4 guests. And it was their first time in Toastmasters, and I persuaded all 4 guests to join that night. They wanted to join my club, and I said, no. You came to Prestige, you belong in Prestige. You remember that, Annie? Yeah. And those members came, I think they've all moved on now, but they came, they joined the club, they contributed to the club for a long time. I go back to Toastmasters, Prestige Toastmasters. I remember coaching some of your members for speech competitions like Lila and Claire from a long time ago. And my wife got very involved in Toastmasters. She knew Stephen and Jerry and a lot of the older members in Prestige. And I know my wife and Annie were very, very close friends, even towards the end of her life. Very, very close friends. So myself and my wife have had a long association with Prestige as long as we've been in Toastmasters. And we're very thankful for that because you became like a second home away from TGI and Born to Shine. If we could go to any other club, we would always come to Prestige. So thank you, Prestige. And also today, I'm really happy to see so many guests here. Yeah, let's put up with guests. And I'm very happy because I asked Jonathan, what do you want me to speak about? He said, come give a keynote. I said, what about? He said, about inspirational speaking. And so I hope today that we've got many members from many different clubs, and I hope today some of what I say will sink in, because I think what I want to say today should be spread out through Taiwan. And I'll get into a little bit more of that later on. But before I get into talking about what is an inspirational speech, I must confess, I entered the speech competition on Sunday. I came third. I'm not quite sure if I know how to inspire a Taiwan audience. It was really interesting when I spoke about inspiration, right? Because on Sunday after the contest, my friend Joseph Kalpin, he did a very, very quick survey of the Taiwanese people, the foreigners, and the Japanese people, because he speaks Japanese. And he asked them, which speech won? All the Taiwanese people said Coco's speech about her dog. All the foreigners said my speech about my wife. And all the Japanese people said Maya's speech about like father, like son, even though she's a girl. So it was very interesting that inspiring or motivational speeches depends on culture. When Joe told me that, I came out and I went and started asking people to prepare for this workshop. What for you is an inspiring speech? And I asked between Sunday evening and between now, I've asked about 15 people. And I got 15 different answers. So I was speaking to my mom before the workshop and asked her, and I told my mom, and mom said, well, what was the common thread? I said, nothing. Every answer was so completely different. It's hard to talk about an inspirational speech when people have a different view of what an inspirational speech is. So today, I'm going to be speaking about what I think an inspirational speech is, what it includes, and how to deliver it, right? Because I think inspiration for different people means different things. But for me, it means searching for the victory within our own hearts. That's what it means. Very often, especially with English, people get confused between inspiration and motivation. Now, Now, in the old manuals, how many of you remember the CC manual, like way back in the day? Like a couple of us remember, right? A couple of us who are not like 20, we remember, right? We had the CC manual, and speech 9 was the motivational speech, and speech 10 was the inspirational speech. Clearly there's a difference. Clearly there's a difference. What's the difference between motivation and inspiration? And I've kind of hinted it to over here. The one is about internal victory. The one is about winning for yourself. The internal victory inside yourself. That is the thing that we seek for ourselves, the thing that carries us in our lives. It's the thing that gives us, defines who we are, gives us meaning and purpose. That's inspiration. Motivation is the external victory. Motivation is the thing that gets you to climb up a mountain. And I want you to think about a mountain, right? I want you to think about a mountain. Like going up a mountain is very hard. Lester and I ride bicycles together. Right now he's much quicker than me up mountains because I'm really lazy and fat. But
He was much quicker.
once a long time ago. But going up a mountain on a bicycle, you need a lot of motivation and be like, oh, it's jayo, 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 right? That's motivation. It's the pushing you up, pushing you up, pushing you up that mountain. It's that external victory. But the internal victory. Imagine that mountain again, but you're in a tunnel and there's no light. And it's very dark. And you don't know what to do. And you're stuck. You're in pain. You're hurt. That's when you need inspiration. That's when you need somebody to come and say, you know what, no matter how dark it is, no matter how hard it is, your life is worth something. Your life has meaning. Your life has purpose. You see, motivation will get you up the mountain, but that mountain's you're going to get to the top, and you're going to come down. You're going to go up, you're going to come down. You're going to come up, you're going to come down. But what? Motivation never lasts. Inspiration is forever. When you're in that tunnel, and you have those inspiring stories in your mind, you go through that tunnel slowly, one step at a time. It's dark. But maybe sometime you get out into the bright light. And it gets a little bit lighter. And I use this analogy because in 2020, when they asked me the tabletop question, the question was, before I say that, the night before we were practicing a tabletop competition, and my standard answer was love. Whatever question you ask me, I say love. And that day they asked us, if you're in a dark tunnel and you see a light, what does that light represent? And my friend Eric was in my head. He said, you always say love. And I was about to say love, I said, Eric's in my head. And the first thing that popped out of my mouth was hope. Hope. And then I had to make up a whole speech about hope. Which worked out for me, it was alright. But my point being is when you're in that tunnel, it's the hope, it's that victory within that will keep you going, no matter how dark it gets. And the motivation is going to keep you going up the mountain. But what gets you through the dark parts of your life? And that is, for me, is the big difference between inspiration and motivation. Motivation is all about the things we say for the external victories. But the inspiration are the things we hear and the things we say that give us the internal victories. And so today that's what I'm going to be focusing on, is inspirational speaking. And I've broken my presentation up into three stories, three parts. The first is the life, the second is the story, and the third is the telling. And so we'll just go into a little bit of more detail. The first thing for an inspirational story, you can never ever have an inspirational story if you do not live an inspirational life. And I'll say that again, you can never ever tell inspirational stories if you do not live an inspirational life, especially about your own life. Or if you do not read about inspirational lives, you can never really inspire anybody. The most important thing to do is to live an authentic life. And that's why the title of my speech is Authentic. Real. Being you. If you are not you, how can you inspire anybody else? One of my great friends in Toastmasters is a guy called Joseph Kalpin. How many of you know Joseph Kalpin? Joseph is an incredible human being. But when he became president of TGIF after me, the first two meetings he wasn't connecting with our people. And before the next meeting he sat down with me and he told me the problem. He said, Paul, I'm not connecting with the people in our club. What's going on here? And I said to him, because you're trying to be like me. You're trying to be Paul Sharpe, not Joseph Kalpin. Because you see, when I'm a TME or I'm a Toastmaster, I'm like, rah, rah, rah. I'm like Aaron, right? I'm big, I'm loud, I'm in your face. I really can host a crowd. But Joe is not that person. He's a different person. And immediately he switched and he became Joseph Kalpin. And all of a sudden he became one of the greatest presidents our club has ever known when he became himself. And since then, Joe has continued to grow and become himself. Another example is my great friend over here, Eric. Eric is one. How many of you know Eric? Anybody? Eric is one of the funniest guys I know. If you ever come to our club, like he always wins the most humorous competition, even when he's not there. He's always the most humorous speaker. It's like really unfortunate, right? None of us can win. You'll get up there and nobody will laugh and they'll vote for him anyway. I'm jealous of him. I wish I could be funny like him, but I can't. But you know what? It's okay, I'm taller. Yeah.
That wasn't that funny.
Still love you, bro. Yeah. So you have to be you have to be authentic. You cannot be somebody else. But the third most important thing about living this life is an inspirational life. It's not a life that's lived for yourself. It's a life that's lived in service to others. You think about the most inspiring people you know, people like Mother Teresa. They live their life serving other people, not themselves. If you're going to be in Toastmasters, you need to serve other people. We have people in Toastmasters who become directors and division directors for themselves. They want the recognition, they want the power, they want the leadership. Or they get very high leadership positions so they can grow their business. But they're not about us, they're not about the members. I can honestly say that I'm so blessed to know people in my club, like Iris Job, or May Jung, who's not here today. But Iris is known as the mother of our club, and May Jung is known as the mother of Born to Shine. Pretty much like Annie is known as the mother of Prestige. And we love them, why? Because they give without expectation, and they contribute without expectation. They live these inspiring lives. My wife Queenie was like that. She served. She did so much for Toastmasters. We used to have this huge hall in the Howard Plaza Hotel on Shinshan South Road. And that was her. And the rent was like $2,000 a night. Huge hall, big, like could seat 60 people, beautiful hall. She got that for us from our school. When Matthew Mack, at that point the president of Alpha, asked Queenie, hey, can we go rent a room in your school? My wife said yes. And Matthew said, but we can't afford so much money. And my wife said, okay, well, just pay what you can. Because of that, my wife lost her job. She served. And she sacrificed for that service. She sacrificed her job. 2-3 years later, the school came to her and said, you're doing a favor for your friend. And they fired her. So sometimes we serve. That's an inspirational life. We serve without expectation of return. That's an inspirational life. That's what we should always be doing. And that's what Toastmasters should be, right? One of the core values of Toastmasters is serve, to serve others. And so I think it's very important for us to realize that we cannot be inspiring if we are selfish, if we are self-centered. We need to be there for everybody else. In our club, I can say most of the people in my clubs, I've seldom come here, but even in Prestige, the times I've been here in the past, most people I know in Toastmasters are giving. And I know I said some of the leaders, but I'll tell you there have been great directors in Toastmasters in Taiwan, like Teresa Tang, Trini Ding, Mike Young, people who just give and give and give year out and expect nothing in return. So we are blessed in Taiwan to have these people who just give and don't expect anything in return. You cannot tell an inspirational story if you're in this club for yourself or for your own benefit or for your own business. You can only tell inspirational stories if you're living a life for other people. And so before you can even get to the inspirational stories, ask yourself, how am I living? You see, I believe that an authentic life is lived according to your values. In our club, we are a Christian club. And our great founding father, Westerlin over there, he has this motto that everybody who walks through our doors is a VIP guest that God himself sent, even if we don't like you.
You pretend.
We will still love you. And that's because it's from the Bible. In the Bible, it talks about, in the book of Genesis, it talks about how man and woman are created in the image of God. For the Christian, God is a real being. He's not something out there that's in the ether. He's a real being, a real spirit out there. And the Bible is very clear that we are created in the image of God. You, even if you're not Christians, are all image bearers of God. The Latin is beautiful, the Imago Dei. And so when you come to our club, that is our core value, that when you walk into our club, we will treat you as an image bearer of God. Even if we don't like you, we have to love you. And so to have firm values and to live according to those values, and if you live according to those values, you will have stories that can inspire people to live great lives. And so you can inspire people to find the victory in their own hearts. When they're in that tunnel in the mountain, they will keep on going. because of the example you set in your own life. So the most inspirational story you can ever tell is the inspirational story of your life, living according to your values and your principles. And one of the stories I have of that is my wife, Queenie. Some of you know she passed away in December from ovarian cancer. But a few months before she died, we were having coffee, and she told me, you know, Paul, I've tasted the beauty of life. I have no regrets. She had no regrets about life. She lived life according to her principles and her standards. And right up until her death, she never said once, I'm sorry I got cancer. She said, I love my life and I love living. And so that's what it means to live according to your values and your principles. Whatever they may be, just continue to live by them. And you can live an inspirational life. But remember, live it in the service of others. The second point is the story itself. What stories do we tell? How do we choose a story? And I've titled this section Gravity versus Candy Floss or Cotton Candy. Mien Hua, sorry? Tang. Yeah, Mien Hua Tang. You all know Mien Hua Tang, right? How many of you like Mien Hua Tang? Yeah, we all like it, right? When we eat cotton candy, how do we feel? We feel great, right? It's like yum, 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 yum. So delicious. It gives you this like temporary high and then it's finished. It goes in your mouth, it melts, and it's finished. Unfortunately in Toastmasters, I think that we've gone the wrong direction. That most of Toastmasters, when we're giving inspirational speeches, we look for the cotton candy. We look for that thing that can give us something in the moment, but will not last with us forever. It will not be the great inspirational speeches that will survive in our minds. One of the greatest inspirational speeches ever given in Toastmasters was the world champion speech, I see something in you. In Toastmasters, we always say, hey, have a call to action. What's the call to action in that? Nothing. It's like, I see something in you, but I don't know what it is. Cheers, I'm off. That's it. His whole message is there's something special in you. There's no call to action. There's nothing to say, go and do something. The whole thing is, I see something in you. Go find that victory within. That's why it's inspirational. It's not cotton candy, but it's something that's powerful. And so inspirational stories are written here. Gravity versus candy floss. Gravity has weight. There are stories with meaning and purpose. There are stories of consequence that inspire us. And I've written down a couple of names here, and I read this one today. Isidore and Ida Strauss. Everybody say that with me. Isidore and Ida Strauss. Do you know who they are? None of you watched the Titanic? Oh, you know Leonardo DiCaprio, right? But this is a true story. I read this today. It popped up on my Facebook feed. I thought, how appropriate. They were an elderly couple on the Titanic. And Ida is the wife, Isidore is the man. And they were putting in the lifeboats because they were very rich. And she had on her fur coat. Took her and put her on the lifeboat. And then they said to her husband, please go on. He said, I will not get on the lifeboat until all the women and children are safe. And so his wife got off the lifeboat and she stood there. She said to her husband, we have had 40 years of life together and we have 6 children. Let's give other people a chance for life. And they were standing there and then a wave came and killed them. Took them off the boat and they died. It's inspiring. It's not candy floss. It has weight. It has meaning. Stories of consequence will inspire us to live according to our values, according to our principles. Now, I wrote another name down, Rob Hall. Rob Hall was a mountaineer, a high mountain mountaineer. He was one of the first people to pioneer commercial mountain climbing on Mount Everest. And he was made famous by the book Into Thin Air. Because he was the leader of Mount Everest climb where a lot of people died in 1996. Rob died on that mountain on that day. He could have got down. He could have got down, but he didn't. Because some of the people he had taken up, some of the people he was leading were still up there. And so he decided to be a leader of consequence, a man of consequence. And he sacrificed his life in the failed attempt to save somebody else. The last thing he said to his wife was, don't worry about me, sweetheart. I'll be fine. Stories of consequence, not candy floss. Candy floss is going to give you a momentary fix. But stories of gravity and consequence are things that will inspire other people. Stories with depth and meaning. Sadly, many of them end in tragedy. I can tell you all the stories about my wife. Her story ended in tragedy, but her life was inspiring even to the end. Her love and her passion for life. If you knew her, you'd know that. Eric and Lester and so many other people would come to the hospital and have parties in the hospital with her. And the nurses would get so angry with me. I'd take Queenie out in the wheelchair and I'd push her to the university next door. And I'd come back 4 hours later and the nurses would be yelling at me. I'd take Queenie to the 7-Eleven at 8 o'clock at night and we'd sit there talking. And the nurses would get so angry at me again. But I didn't care because she wanted to live and enjoy her life. But it ended tragically. That's a story of consequence. If I told you the story of Queenie, it would be very inspiring. But unfortunately, Toastmasters, we're looking for candy floss. We're looking for the yes. Just say yes, but that gets you nowhere in life. Makes you feel good in the moment. But how's it going to take you through the tunnel in that moment? It's not. You get stuck. So if you want to tell inspiring stories, don't be afraid of the weight of the story. Don't be afraid of how difficult that story is. I'm not saying candy floss stories are bad. Of course, we need moments of humor in life. We need moments of fun. We need moments of joy. We sometimes need different kinds of speeches. And I'm not trying to say that those speeches aren't relevant. Yes, we need them in life. If you only listen to stories of weight and consequence, it will be too depressing. But those are the stories that inspire us to find that victory within. And today you've asked me to speak about inspirational speaking. That's why I'm focusing on it. And so I think that the story is most important. I've written a couple of other names here. Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a man of consequence. He was a Christian theologian and pastor during World War II. He saw the evil of Adolf Hitler and he joined the plot against Adolf Hitler. And 10 days before the plot to kill Adolf Hitler, he was caught. And 10 days before the World War II ended, they killed him. His last words on earth, well, his last recorded words on earth were, for me, this is the end. For me, the beginning. A life of consequence. If you read his story, you'd be so deeply inspired and moved by a man who would stand up in the face of the most evil dictator of the 20th century. Anne Frank, one of the most inspiring people from World War II. Another story of consequence. Lived in a small room for 2 years as a teenager, writing a diary. Was caught by the Germans and died in a concentration camp. And we read these stories and we are deeply inspired by them. Yes, they had tragic ends, but they were lives of consequence that inspired people and continue to inspire people today. So if you want to inspire people, do not be afraid of the weight of a story. And so the first tip for inspirational story is go live a life of consequence. Go live a life that can be inspirational in service of others. And the second thing is when you find those stories with weight and meaning and depth, don't be afraid to tell them. The third point here is the telling of the stories. And this is something which I really want to focus on for District 67 in particular. Remember the campfire. Remember the campfire. You see, I come from South Africa, and near my house, there's these mountain ranges called the Drakensberg. And inside the Drakensberg, there are the caves. And inside the caves, there are the paintings on the wall by the Bushmen. All tribes. You see, when they were telling stories, they would have a campfire, and they'd sit around the campfire. And they'd have to sit there like this, because they jumped up. Their heads hit the top, right? If they danced around with all their crazy body language, they get burned. You see, Toastmasters now encourages ridiculous body movement. Insane. It's led by guys like Darren Tay wearing underpants, and everybody thinks, oh, that's a beautiful candy floss moment. Let's vote for it. I like Darren, he's a good guy. But candy floss moments like that are not necessary in great speaking. I want you to think about Steve Jobs. Stay hungry, stay foolish. He stood behind a podium. Winston Churchill. We will fight on the beaches, we will fight in the land, we shall fight in the air, we shall fight in the sea, but we will never surrender from a podium. And the greatest of all, Martin Luther King. I have a dream from a podium. None of this idiotic running around in the stadium. I entered a speech contest on Sunday, came third. In the area contest, there was G1, G2, G3, 5 members. I could see the judge sitting in front of me, and she had a scorecard out. 2 people in area G2 could hardly speak English, and one of them forgot their speech. But that judge, because my speech, I stood and I delivered from one place, had me 5 out of 5. So I said to my friend Eric, what should I do? I should go to the speech contest, add some body language into my speech until I get to the district final, and I should just stand there. But I didn't. In the district final, I started to move. Our keynote speaker and our guest speaker told me on Monday morning when he saw me, he said to me, Paul, I didn't like your speech. I said, why not? He said, because of all the body language. It looked fake, it looked inauthentic, it looked unreal. And I agreed with him. And I showed him the original speech I gave in my club where I just stood and stand and delivered. And he said, that was powerful. But what's happened with Toastmasters and the judge, that's why I'm so happy there's so many people here today, is that they've said to us that we need to dance around like ponies. We need to be clowns on the stage. But that's not inspiration. You think of Barack Obama. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. From where? Behind a podium. I want you to think about 10,000 years ago, when they were sitting around the campfire, and all they had were their voices in the middle of the night. They would sit there and tell stories. When I was a young kid, I was a Boy Scout. And then every night we'd build a campfire, and we'd sit around that campfire, and we'd tell stories. Nobody stood up. We used our voices. We used our life stories. We used our experience. We were kids. We were only 14 years old. Sure, we tell a lot of ghost stories. But we sat there. There was no need for excessive body language. There was no need for ridiculous body language. There was no need to be a dancing pony on the stage. Authentic stories are told in an authentic way. Walking around the stage, doing crazy, stupid body language does not make a speech inspirational. What makes a speech inspirational is the authenticity of the delivery. Maybe Greg was right, the guest speaker. Maybe I didn't sound authentic because they were so distracted by my body language that I was trying to put in to win a competition. And he was right. I should have ignored it all and just stood and delivered my speech. To tell inspiring stories, the first thing is to go and live an inspirational life, living that speech according to your values. Once you have figured it out, how to live that life, go find the inspirational stories that have weight, not candy floss. Don't be afraid to share them. Not every speech has to be full of jokes and humor. Some speeches don't lend themselves to jokes and humor. And the third thing to remember is when you tell the story, remember Steve Jobs, Martin Luther King, Winston Churchill, Barack Obama, standing behind a podium, delivering powerful, inspirational speeches that saved countries, that inspired generations. You don't need crazy body language on the stage. What you do need is a good story that has weight and consequence, told in an authentic way. Thank you for having me, Prestige, and go and inspire Taiwan. That's all.